The sun had barely crested the horizon when the rumble of engine noise shattered the tranquil morning in the quiet suburban neighborhood. John, a former Marine Corps veteran, emerged from his home, his brow furrowed with alarm. Two hulking trucks emblazoned with the HOA logo had pulled up to the end of his driveway, disgorging a small army of workers. "What the hell is going on here?" John shouted, marching towards the commotion. His gaze fixed on the workers advancing towards his neatly manicured lawn, tools in hand. The HOA president, a prim woman named Evelyn, stepped forward, her expression pinched with barely contained disdain. "Mr. Donovan, we've received numerous complaints about your flagpole. It's in clear violation of our community guidelines, and we're here to have it removed." John's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. "That flag has flown on this property for 15 years. It's a symbol of the service I gave to this country, and you're not taking it down." Evelyn's lips pursed, her eyes narrowing. "I'm afraid you don't have a choice in the matter, Mr. Donovan. The HOA has voted, and the decision is final. If you refuse to comply, we'll be forced to take legal action." The former Marine's gaze swept over the assembled workers, his mind racing as he contemplated his next move. He had fought for his country, endured the horrors of war, and he'd be damned if he'd let a group of petty bureaucrats trample on his rights. "You're not taking down that flag," John growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Not while I'm still standing." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening with determination. "Very well, Mr. Donovan. You leave us no choice." She turned to the workers, her voice sharp and commanding. "Proceed with the removal. And if he tries to interfere, call the police." The workers advanced, their tools at the ready, as John braced himself for the confrontation to come. This was his home, his land, and he would defend it with every fiber of his being. The workers descended upon the flagpole, their tools poised to strike. John stepped forward, his body tense and his expression unyielding. "I told you, you're not taking that flag down. Not over my dead body." Evelyn's brow furrowed, her lips pursed in a thin line. "Mr. Donovan, this is your last warning. Stand down, or we'll have no choice but to involve the authorities." John's gaze swept over the workers, his mind racing as he considered his options. He had served his country with honor, fought for the freedoms that these bureaucrats now sought to deny him. The thought of surrendering his flag, his symbol of patriotism, was unthinkable. "You can call the cops if you want," John growled. "But I'm not going anywhere." With that, he planted himself firmly in front of the flagpole, his arms crossed over his chest in a defiant stance. The workers hesitated, their tools poised in the air, unsure of how to proceed. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her frustration palpable. "Mr. Donovan, you're making a grave mistake. This is your last chance to comply before we take legal action." John's gaze never wavered, his expression unwavering. "I've made my decision, Evelyn. This flag stays, and if you want to take it down, you'll have to go through me." The tension in the air was palpable, the silence broken only by the faint rustling of the flag in the breeze. The workers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between John and Evelyn, uncertain of how to proceed. Suddenly, the sound of a car engine roared to life, and a battered pickup truck careened into the driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust. The driver's side door swung open, and a grizzled-looking man in his 60s emerged, his eyes blazing with fury. "What the hell is going on here?" the newcomer bellowed, storming towards the scene. The newcomer, a weathered-looking Vietnam veteran named Frank, strode towards the confrontation, his gaze fixed on the HOA workers and Evelyn. "What's the meaning of this?" Frank demanded, his voice rough and commanding. "You can't just come in here and start tearing down someone's flag. That's un-American, goddammit." Evelyn's expression tightened, her composure faltering in the face of Frank's angry outburst. "Sir, this is a private matter between the HOA and Mr. Donovan. I'd kindly ask you to stay out of it." Frank let out a derisive snort, his eyes narrowing. The hell I will. That flag represents the sacrifices of men and women who fought for this country. You think you can just waltz in here and disrespect that? He moved to stand beside John, his imposing frame a clear signal that he was not to be trifled with. The workers shifted uneasily, their tools still poised, but hesitant to make a move. Evelyn's brow furrowed, her lips pursed in a thin line. Gentlemen, I understand your feelings, but this is a matter of community guidelines. The HOA has voted, and the decision is final. The hell it is, Frank shouted, his voice echoing through the quiet neighborhood. You think you can just trample on a veteran's rights like this? Not on my watch, sweetheart. John's gaze shifted between Frank and Evelyn, a glimmer of hope flickering in his eyes. The arrival of the Vietnam vet had changed the dynamic, and he could sense the wavering in the HOA president's stance. Evelyn's expression darkened, her frustration evident. This is your last warning, Mr. Donovan. If you and your friend don't stand down, we'll have no choice but to call the police. The workers tensed, their tools still at the ready, as the standoff continued to unfold. The air was thick with tension, and the outcome hung in the balance. The standoff between John, Frank, and the HOA crew continued to escalate, the tension palpable in the air. Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she glared at the two veterans. Gentlemen, this is your final chance. Step aside and let my crew do their job, or we'll have no choice but to involve the authorities. John stood his ground, his jaw set in a determined line. I'm not going anywhere, Evelyn. This flag means everything to me, and I'll be damned if I let you take it down. Frank stepped forward, his imposing frame towering over the HOA workers. You heard the man. This flag stays put, and if you so much as lay a finger on it, you'll be answering to me. The workers shifted uneasily, their tools still poised, but the uncertainty in their movements was palpable. Evelyn's expression darkened, her frustration evident. Gentlemen, you're making the grave mistake. This is your last warning. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll have no choice but to call the police and have you both arrested for obstruction. John and Frank exchanged a silent glance, their eyes locked in an unspoken understanding. They had both sworn an oath to defend their country, and they weren't about to back down now. Suddenly, a loud commotion could be heard in the distance, the sound of car horns and shouting voices drawing closer. Evelyn's brow furrowed as she turned towards the disturbance, her eyes widening with alarm. A caravan of vehicles, their windows adorned with American flags and patriotic slogans, came into view, barreling down the street towards the Donovan residence. Dozens of people, mostly veterans and their families, poured out of the cars, converging on the scene. What is the meaning of this? Evelyn cried, her voice quavering with fear. The surge of veterans and their supporters flooded into the neighborhood, quickly surrounding the HOA workers and Evelyn. Their voices were a cacophony of outrage and patriotism, drowning out any attempt at communication from the HOA representatives. How dare you try to take down veterans' flag? This is an outrage. We won't stand for it. You can't disrespect our heroes like this. John and Frank stood their ground, their expressions a mix of relief and determination. They had not called for reinforcements, but the arrival of their fellow veterans was a welcome sight. Evelyn's face had turned a pale shade of white, her composure slipping as she tried to regain control of the situation. Everyone, please calm down. This is a private matter between the HOA and Mr. Donovan. We have the right to enforce our community guidelines. Her words were met with a deafening roar of disapproval from the crowd. A burly former Marine pushed his way to the front, his chest adorned with a Purple Heart and other combat medals. Community guidelines? He bellowed, his voice booming over the din. This man served his country, and you want to take down his flag. That's a goddamn disgrace. The crowd erupted in a chorus of cheers and applause, their support for John and his flag unwavering. Evelyn's eyes darted around, her expression one of growing panic. She turned to the HOA workers, her voice quivering. "Stand down. We're leaving." The workers reluctantly complied, their tools lowered as they retreated to their trucks. Evelyn shot one last withering glare at John and Frank before storming off. Her departure met with jeers and taunts from the crowd. John and Frank watched as the HOA vehicles pulled away, their expressions a mix of relief and pride. The veterans and their families surrounded them, offering handshakes, hugs, and words of gratitude and support. As the HOA trucks disappeared down the street, the crowd of veterans and their families gathered around John and Frank, their faces beaming with pride and camaraderie. A grizzled-looking man in his 60s, his chest adorned with several service medals, stepped forward and grasped John's hand firmly. "You did the right thing, son. That flag is a symbol of everything we fought for, and we'll be damned if we let anyone take it down." John nodded, his eyes glistening with emotion. "Thank you, sir. I served my country, and this flag means the world to me. I couldn't just stand by and let them take it down." The man nodded, his expression solemn. "We understand, son. We all know what that flag represents, and we're not going to let anyone disrespect it, not on our watch." Frank stepped forward, his gruff voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "I saw what was going on and couldn't just stand by and let it happen. These bureaucrats think they can trample all over our rights, but they've got another thing coming." A chorus of affirmations and cheers erupted from the assembled veterans, their support for Frank and John unwavering. A young woman, her face etched with determination, stepped forward. "We're not going to let this stand. The HOA needs to know that they can't just bully our veterans like this. We're going to fight back, and we're going to win." The crowd erupted in a thunderous roar of approval, their fists pumping the air in a show of solidarity. John and Frank exchanged a glance, their expressions a mix of relief and resolve. They had fought for their country, and now their fellow veterans had their backs. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. As the crowd of veterans continued to rally around John and Frank, a sense of determination and purpose began to take hold. The initial confrontation had been a wake-up call, a realization that the HOA's actions were not only disrespectful, but a threat to the rights and values that the veterans had fought to protect. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a graying beard stepped forward, his voice commanding the attention of the group. "All right, listen up, everyone. We can't just let this slide. We need to take action, and we need to do it quickly." The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning to the man as he continued. "This HOA has a history of abusing its power and disrespecting the sacrifices of our veterans. Well, it's time we put a stop to it, once and for all." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and the man's expression hardened. "We're going to organize a protest, a massive show of force that will send a clear message to the HOA and the entire community. We'll make sure that everyone knows that we won't stand for this kind of disrespect, not on our watch." John and Frank exchanged a glance, their faces reflecting a mixture of surprise and determination. They had not expected this level of support, nor the intensity of the response, but they were both ready to fight for their rights. "What do you have in mind?" John asked, his voice steady and resolute. The man's lips curled into a grim smile. "We're going to flood this neighborhood with veterans and their families. We'll march, we'll chant, we'll make our voices heard. And we won't stop until the HOA backs down and guarantees that your flag stays where it belongs." The crowd erupted in a thunderous cheer, their excitement palpable. John and Frank stood together, their shoulders squared, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the days that followed, the veteran-led protest against the HOA's attempt to remove John's flag gathered momentum, drawing in more and more supporters from across the community and beyond. John and Frank found themselves at the center of the movement, their shared experiences and unwavering resolve inspiring others to join the cause. The neighborhood was transformed into a sea of red, white, and blue as veterans and their families descended in droves, their voices united in a chorus of defiance. The HOA, sensing the growing public backlash, tried in vain to stand its ground, but the sheer force of the protest overwhelmed their attempts at suppression. Evelyn, the HOA president, found herself increasingly isolated and under pressure from the local authorities, who recognized the importance of the veterans' cause and the need to maintain public order. As the protest wore on, the HOA's position became increasingly untenable. Faced with the sustained pressure and the growing threat of legal action, they were forced to concede defeat, issuing a public apology and guaranteeing that John's flag would remain in place, a symbol of the sacrifices and service of the nation's veterans. The victory was celebrated with an outpouring of patriotism and camaraderie, as the veterans and their families gathered around John's home, the flag fluttering proudly in the breeze. It was a testament to the power of collective action, the unwavering spirit of those who had served their country, and the enduring significance of the symbols that they hold dear. In the end, the HOA's attempt to remove the flag had backfired spectacularly, serving only to galvanize the veteran community and reaffirm the deep-rooted respect and appreciation for those who had fought to protect the freedoms that all Americans hold so dear.